Good evening. Today we are doing a remix of a song from one of my favourite bands of all time, one of my favourite albums of all time, and one of my favourite songs of all time. We're doing a song in the style of 90's house, therefore it's pertinent I got an a cappella from the 80's. Let's get into it. And there we have it. Let's run it from the beginning, shall we? Right, there we have it. So first of all, we are in A sharp minor. And we're starting off with some very 90s, almost 80s sounding chords. So this is just a patch from Analog Lab that I found. There's absolutely sensational for these kind of retro 90s, 80s sounds. Grand Piano 1. It's got a little bit of Timeless on there as a echo. Bit of OTT just to crunch it up a tiny bit. Depth is only at 5%, and then a little bit of Soothe to take out some of those really harsh frequencies. So our chords, we are doing A sharp minor, which is the first, D sharp minor, which is the fourth, F minor, which is the fifth, and then going straight back to the 1, so back to the A minor. So the way that I've laid out these chords is pretty basic. So if I put this scale on our MIDI track, then we can understand this a little bit clearer. So we're starting on the 1, the A sharp, 1 octave above, A sharp again, and then the 5th, and then the 3rd right at the top. So this would be a normal triad. So our 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 1, 3, 5 is the basic building block of our chord. And then the 3rd is just 1 octave above. So shift up, we'll take that 1 octave above. Similar for our second chord, we are on the D sharp, the root note. D sharp again, an octave higher. And this time the 3rd is not an octave above, it is on the same octave. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got a 1, 3rd, and our 5th. And then this one up here is just another octave of our root note. So that is a D sharp again. And our final chord is the F again, an octave higher. The 5th, which is the A sharp, and then our 3rd, which is the G sharp. So here again, you see our triad pattern, and then we've just added in this 4th. So if they were all in the same octave, it would look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but this time we've got them an octave up. And a lot of house music in this era, and actually house music generally, will use these kind of unusual notes that aren't traditional triads. They work really well to add a different sort of element of emotion into your chord progression. And you can kind of play about with it. I would always start off with your basic triad like this and then add notes around that. So in this instance, I felt that having the 3rd and the 4th an octave higher was the one that sounded best. And quite often in house, I find it's easy to just add 7ths and 9ths and 4ths all over the place to try and make the chords a little bit more interesting. But it can lose the catchiness of the chord progression. So the reason in this chord progression that I've only done an interesting note in only one of the chords is because I felt like it was taken away from the catchiness. So if we just listen to that by itself. So you still get that no, da, da, da. So you still hear that there are notes that catch you in that chord progression. So it still sort of lingers in your ear. Even if it was an instrumental track, you would still pick up that as a melody. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind when you're writing melodies, is that it is catchy by itself. Because if we added a load of sort of 5ths and 7ths all over the place here, that last one just takes you away from the melody a little bit. It doesn't follow the pattern of dun, 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 dun. So without them, you latch on to that melody much easier. And another thing I've done is I've just pushed the 2nd chord and the 4th chord forwards in time. So this would be our 4 bar. So everything's hitting on the first beat. So I've just taken them 1 beat forwards, so it has a little bit of push to it. It gives it a little bit more rhythm before we've actually introduced any rhythmic elements. So the foundation of the harmony is actually already gathering some rhythm. And what really helps that is this timeless that I've gotten as well. It's just doing 8th notes and without the echo on it. And with. So it just gives it a little bit of gallop with that delay. And then high string, of course, just on the root note. And the most important thing when I was writing this chord progression is that it works with the vocals. So I had the vocals in the project already and I wrote the chord progression around those vocals. So it's all well and good having a really good sounding chord progression. But if it doesn't work well with the vocals, then there's no point. That is the main thing to keep in mind, is that it's working with your vocals, obviously. I don't have to sell my soul. He's already in me. I don't need sell my soul. He's already in me. I wanna be adored. So as we come into this little break, we are changing up the rhythm. So I'm keeping this same sort of 80s patch, but rather than doing these drawn out chords that we did before, we're just introducing a bit of a rhythm. And then we're just introducing this Nexus piano. Phoenix preset from Nexus. And then I've got a similar preset on Nexus that's doing a lead. So we're doing the exact same rhythm as our chords. And I feel sometimes it's easy to overcomplicate writing leads. And I always find that if your chords and your lead and your bass all have a rhythmic harmony, so they're all sort of sitting in the same kind of pockets and you're playing them at the same time, then it's much easier for it to sound cohesive as a song. So this lead, I would have copied these chords into this lead and then worked out a lead with one note that worked. So I ended up landing on this lead. So the notes that lead is playing are all already playing in our chords, but it's just helping to emphasize a certain part of that lead. So if we look at the relationship between our lead, which is these green notes here, and then our chords, which is the red notes. Here on our lead, as we're playing an A sharp minor, we're playing the F in the melody, which is the 5th. Then in our second chord, we're playing the D sharp, and in our melody, we're playing the F sharp, which is the 3rd. And for our third chord, we're playing the F minor. And in our melody, we're playing the A sharp, which is the 4th. And then when we come back to the A sharp minor, we're playing the C sharp, which is these tiny little green notes here. And that is the 3rd. So as our progression takes place, even though we're playing the same chords in our 1 and our 4 chord, the notes that we're playing in our melody change down from the 5th at first to the 3rd. So that creates a little bit of movement as that melody is going on. And then to increase the build, we're introducing this arm and break. And a couple of shakers. So to transition from this first part of the build to the second, I've got this little synth in here just to transition us, which is just a super simple patch I made, Evolution in digital, a little bit of a filter on it, a little bit processing, and then we're just changing the pitch bend. So we've just got a 4 to the floor kick, and I've got a little top kick on there as well. And the bass is doing a lot of work rhythmically. So all these little bass flicks here and there are adding a lot to the foundation of the rhythm. So if we didn't have these little bits in, it might sound a little bit stale. So with those, so little changes in the length of the notes, so it's not just staying on the root note of the chords every time it's been played. So this would be the foundation, would be these notes here, and then these little bits added onto that are just helping to keep it gathering along and give it a little bit of movement. And then with the drums, I've got 4 claps for some reason. I obviously made this very late at night because that's kind of insane, but we move. Sounds all right. And then some layers of hats. And this hat is a really important one. It's really adding quite a lot of gallop to it. So I've made it sound as human as I can by affecting these velocities. So we had the velocities all at the same level. Sounds alright, but it doesn't quite sound human. So if you automate the level of the velocities, it will make it sound a little bit more human. And I've got a swing on there as well. The swing 16ths 59. Just again, so it doesn't sound so static. Gives it that little bit of human swing. And then I've got this little skip loop that I've cut up so it fits in line with the skip of this hat that I made. Then we've got a ride on top of that. And then another top shaker loop. And then another break, which is used quite a lot in this era of house. And then lastly, I've got these little clats. I don't really know what else to call them. I've always called them clats. They're like offbeat, sort of garagey snares. And I've purposely been a bit lazy with this because you can hear I've not quite cut it up right. There are some little artifacts in there because our drum hit hits here, but I've left a little bit in the sample here. So if we just tighten that up a little bit and we introduce some fades, it'll clean it up quite a lot. So we'll do the same for that one. So that's much cleaner than this because that little bit at the start interrupts the rhythm a little bit. So cleaning up these tiny little bits of your samples are really important because it introduces these clicks that you don't necessarily want sort of muddying up your mix. So all of our drums together. And with the bass. So you can hear just with the foundation, it's already got a lot of groove to it. It sort of stands up by itself before we've added any of the synths and the vocal. So it's important to get these foundations right, because only then will the track really stand on its own 2 feet. And so I've noticed quite a lot in this kind of 90s style house songs, the drop goes on for quite a long time, especially in comparison to the length of drops these days. Normally you'd find a drop would last sort of this long. So maybe 30 seconds in a modern day drop, because that's what sort of radio demands. But traditionally, you'd have drops that are a lot longer. And as these drops go on, it's important to add little variations as it's going on. There can be really slight changes, but they just elevate each section as it goes on. So we've got drop A here. We've still got the same drop, but we're just adding something different just to elevate it a little bit. So in this case, the first half of our drop, we only had the 90s style piano chords playing in the first half. And then in the second half, we introduced the Nexus piano. And we also introduce this lead, which is an octave higher. So just those two elements just help subconsciously for the whole track to lift. And it's not something that the sort of normal consumer of music would ever pick up on consciously, but it does just subconsciously elevate everything just a little bit. And then as we go into our third section of the drop, we're doing a similar thing. So I'm just adding this little sort of riser. Again, super subtle, but it will just help elevate it a little bit. And then we are doing these tiny little vocal chops. Again, it's not something that's really overt, and you don't have to create a whole new melody. You don't have to do anything sort of fantastic and over the top. There's just these tiny little elements that just help it lift, that maybe you didn't hear in the first section, that you do in the second, that just helps keep the listener interested. And it's important not to overdo it, because there's a million ways that you can overcomplicate it. But I think keeping to the rhythm, as I've done here, is just adding an octave up, adding a little bit of a chop that you kind of don't really hear. It's not creating a new melody. And it always just helps keep the listener engaged when you just add these tiny, tiny little bits here and there that will just keep it from being boring. So you're not having the same loop happening again and again. There are slight elevations and changes to that loop. Thank you very much. I do hope this has helped. Love to your mothers.